Before diving in, let's talk about the steps when playing Tools and Titans. So how do you play Tools and Titans? Easy. Draw your cards, charge your energy, build your field, act with your powers, clash with your Titans, end your turn. 6 steps. 1 epic battle. All right, another spark and another build. The weave is open. For weeks, we've explored the known world of Tools and Titans. We've walked the halls of the great guilds. We've met the noble Tool Titans, champions of creation and craft, Valara, the electrician, Masonics, the builder, Titans who turn tradecraft into a superpower.
We've even stared into the abyss of their corrupted reflections, the Rustborn, twisted ideals where purpose curdles into poison, but that was just the reflection in the water. Today, we go beneath the surface.
Today we descend into the deepest, darkest substructure of the game. A place the lore books only whisper about. A place where tradecraft dies screaming, and monstrosity blooms from rust and ruin.
Welcome to the Corrot, the final faction, and the true monsters of the Rustborn legacy. These beings are not corrupted titans. They aren't conceptual anomalies. They are weapons, forged from fear, accident, and annihilation, beings that were never meant to think, only to consume.
So let's start with the basics, though basic feels like the wrong word. Who or what are the Corrot?
The Corrot are a terrifying breed of anti-trade abominations. The Rustborn forged them for a single purpose: to be sentient killing machines, designed specifically to counter, dismantle, and devour titans. They looked at their own corrupted titans, saw the flicker of hope left in them, and said, "We need something without hope, something irredeemable."
You've described them as 10% Titan logic and 90% monster. What does that 10% even look like?
It's the ghost in the machine. Think of it as the cold, predatory instinct of a hunter, but filtered through a corrupted understanding of technology. It's not memory or personality. It's the fragment of a Titan schematic that allows a Corrot to understand how a structure is built, the better to unbuild it. It's the reason they don't just bite, they dismantle.
Anti-craft apex predators. Let's get into the members of this horrifying family. The names alone sound like a threat.
They are. First, there's Snarweld, the molten welding beast. On the table, its attacks often carry a melt effect, permanently reducing the defense of enemy structures.
Drillmire, the tunneling rupture horror. Its whole purpose is to bypass your defenses, emerging in your back row to hit support units directly.
Cravature, the hook-arm excavation killer. It uses pull effects, literally dragging your keycards out of position and disrupting your combos.
Reekthane, a toxic exhaust engine fiend. This one creates hazardous zones on the board, poisoning any Titan that ends its turn there. Area denial in its purest form.
Grapholix, the wirebinder. It doesn't do much damage itself, but it ensnares enemies, preventing them from attacking or using abilities. Then there's Sawraith, a blade phase assassin. It deals bleed damage, a status effect that hurts enemies at the start of their turn.
And the list goes on. Spliker, the split-wire twin. When it's defeated, it splits into 2 weaker copies, forcing you to deal with it all over again. Scorch-Hull, the charred skeletal engine. A nightmare of recursion that can return itself from the junkyard over and over.
Null Spindle, the anti-weave disruptor. Its presence on the field acts as a nullification field, increasing the energy cost of your Titan's abilities. And Weldware, a walking fusion reactor berserker. It builds up energy every turn until it explodes in a massive meltdown burst, hitting everything on the board, including itself.
And we can't forget the reclassified ones. Carbrise, Latchwing, and Threadrin, former Preservent guardians, now twisted into monsters. It's a complete ecosystem of horror.
It is. And together they are known as the First Circle.
So beyond being monsters, what do they represent thematically in the game?
They represent industrial horror given flesh. Each one embodies a deadly, real-world trade hazard, cranked up to 11 and turned into a mythic monstrosity. A slippery floor becomes an oil-slick monster. A faulty wire becomes a parasitic strangler.
They're the Rustborn's true monsters, not corrupted ideals but terrors created without ethics.
Precisely. This makes them a fascinating mirror. Imagine Masonics, the master builder, spending 3 turns creating an impenetrable fortress. Then Drillmire appears. It doesn't attack the fortress. It tunnels under it, devouring its foundation card, and the entire structure collapses into the junkyard. The Corrot turn a Titan's greatest strength into their greatest liability.
Where Titans build and Rustborn corrupt, Corrot consume.
They emerged late in the timeline after the Rustvale protocols failed.
The Rustvale protocols? What were they?
They were the Titans' grand strategy for winning the war, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to create a global purification weave, something that could cleanse the Rustborn and restore them. They poured everything into it, and it almost worked. But the Rustborn, led by the corrupted logician Drafter, found a way to shatter the protocol's core logic. Its failure was catastrophic, and in that failure, the Rustborn realized corrupted Titans could be resisted, or even redeemed.
They needed something irredeemable.
Exactly, a force of pure terror. So they began the Scorch breeding rituals. These are terrible rites performed in the deepest forges, using Rustborn biocircuitry and forbidden energy sources to give birth to new horrors. Others were simply pulled from junkyarded detritus, the discarded parts of failed experiments, now given a hungry, malevolent consciousness.
And they dwell in places that reflect their nature. The lore calls their territories scorch wombs.
They are zones of pure anti-creation. Snarweld's Moltcore Chasm is a game zone where players take continuous fire damage unless they have specific heat-resistant gear cards. Drillmire's Substrata Maw allows it to be placed anywhere on the board, ignoring normal deployment rules.
Cravacher's Hookgrave Ravine has a zone effect that can randomly discard a tool card from a player's hand at the start of their turn. And Reekthane's Fumecrack Vault prevents any healing or cleansing abilities from being used by anyone.
It goes on and on. Each lair is not just a place on the map. It's a dungeon, a raid, a set of rules designed to break you before the monster even attacks.
Which brings us to why they matter for the game itself. Why introduce a faction this oppressive?
Because they represent the final stage of the Rustborn's evolution. They are a test. Can you, the player, adapt to a threat that doesn't play by the rules? They introduce a monster-class deck that functions independently of Titan logic. This represents a pure, absolute threat in the game world, immune to negotiation or moral logic.
In a game of systems and balance, they are the chaos variable. The campaign arc terminators.
Imagine this. You've spent an entire campaign fighting through the Rustborn forces of the Welder Titan Fusio. You finally defeat him. You think you've won. Then the board goes silent, and from the wreckage of Fusio's forge, Snarweld emerges. The real final boss, a monster born from the very destruction you just caused.
And remember how this all works. For a Titan, the turn is a ritual of creation.
Every Titan turn, draw, charge, building act, clash, end.
6 steps. Infinite ways to forge your victory.
The Corrot have a different interpretation.
So how does that translate to the tabletop? How do they actually play?
It starts with their core system, Scorch-Cast decks. A Titan casts a tool, paying energy to create an effect. A Corrot uses a Scorch card. It feels similar, but the effect leaves a permanent scar. It can't be cleansed. The damage sticks.
And their abilities are unusual. Anatomical mechanics, you called them?
Right. Let's take a specific card. Cravacher's Hook Limb Snag. It's a 3-cost Scorch card. Its text reads, pull 1 enemy structure card from the back row to the front row. It cannot move or activate next turn. It doesn't just deal damage. It physically breaks your formation. It turns your defense into a liability.
And their aggression is fueled by taking damage through Berserk triggers.
Yes, it makes you second-guess every move. Many Corrot have a passive ability like Berserk 3. If this unit takes 5 or more damage from a single attack, it gains +3 attack until your next turn. So the strategic challenge isn't just about dealing damage, it's about how you deal it. Do you risk a big attack that could awaken the beast, or do you try to disable it with status effects first?
You also mentioned prey memory. That sounds terrifying.
It's a long-term threat. Some of the elite Corrot have it. When they defeat a Titan, you place a token on the Corrot card, for example, Titan Hunter Masonics. From that point on, that Corrot might have a permanent +2 attack against any Titan with the structure keyword. It learns, it adapts, it remembers who it likes to hunt.
And their ultimate trump card, Weave Immune Abilities.
The most frightening mechanic. The entire game is built on the weave, the flow of energy. Titans manipulate it, Rustborn corrupt it, but a few Corrot, like Null Spindle, simply devour it. Their ability might say, once per turn you may pay 3 health to cancel an opponent's Flux card. They don't counter the spell, they eat the energy before it even forms.
Let's break down the strategy. What are their biggest strengths?
First, as we've said, aggro beast power, unmatched early game aggression. For you as a player, this means you need a strong opening hand. If you have a slow, setup-heavy deck, you might be defeated by turn 4.
Second, unblockable decay. That permanent scorch damage.
This means your health is a non-renewable resource against them. You can't rely on healing. Your goal shifts from outlasting them to outracing them. It forces a more aggressive playstyle from you too.
They're also zone invaders, able to bypass placement rules.
This strength attacks your sense of security. You can't hide your valuable support units in the back row. You have to assume any part of your board can be a front line at any time.
But they do have weaknesses. They aren't unstoppable.
Far from it. Their biggest is no-cast mechanics. It's all brute logic. To exploit this, you use complex multi-stage combos. Their simplistic logic can't account for a 3-card synergy that builds to a devastating effect. They are vulnerable to cleverness.
And they have poor defense.
Yes, they are all offense. This makes alpha strike decks that deliver one massive, overwhelming blow, surprisingly effective. If you can build up a single, powerful Titan and protect it, it can often sweep their entire board in one turn, because they have few to no blocking tools.
Their unpredictable triggers can also be a liability.
A huge one. If you know their Berserk trigger gives them +3 attack, you can bait it out. Let them attack and destroy a weak, sacrificial unit of your own. Then, on your turn, use a card that punishes enemies for having high attack power. You can turn their own strength against them.
Let's talk about the playstyle archetypes. How does a snare-controlled deck actually win a game?
It's a slow, agonizing death for the opponent. Turn 1, Graphelix plays Wire Web Field, a zone card that says non-Corrot units must pay 1 extra energy to move. Turn 2, Latchwing uses Bait Lock on your strongest Titan, a status effect preventing it from attacking. Turn 3, they play another snare card, locking down a second unit. By turn 4, your board is frozen. You can't move, you can't attack, and you're just taking small amounts of damage each turn, completely helpless.
And what about Junkyard Rebirth?
That's a mind game. You're playing against Scorch-Cast, you finally destroy it, you feel relieved, but its Junkyard ability triggers. When Scorch-Cast is sent to the Junkyard, you may return another Corrot with 3 or less cost from your Junkyard to the field. You destroyed one monster only to bring another one back. It forces you to rethink the very goal of combat.
So they are more than just a deck type. They are a core part of the story.
They are essential. They ask the final, terrifying question of the entire game world. We celebrate craft, skill, and building things. The Tool Titans embody this. They are heroes.
But the Corrot are the dark side of that celebration. They represent industrial accidents, negligence, the horrors that are born when craft is pursued without conscience. They symbolize unquestioning entropy.
They show us rust not just corrupting, but actively hunting. They take the idea of tools and turn it into teeth, which brings us to their final haunting question.
What if craft was a predator.
And so, you sit at the table, your opponent across from you. You look at your hand, you plan your moves, you feel the hum of the weave.
In every match of Tools and Titans, your tradecraft unfolds in 6 simple moves: draw, charge, building, act, clash, end,
Simplicity for the novice,
mastery for the Titan.